Integration Joint Board. Welcome to this meeting of the Inverclyde Integration Joint Board. This meeting is being held remotely and will promptly recorded for live subsequent broadcasts available through the council's website. The Integration Joint Board is a joint controller with Inverclyde Council and NHS Glasgow, Greater Glasgow and Clyde under the General Data Protection Regulations and Data Protection Act 2018. This meeting will be broadcast and recorded to fulfill our public task obligation to enable members of the public to observe the democratic process. Data collected in this remote meeting will be retained in accordance with council published policies and available through the council website. Members of the Integration Joint Board are reminded that they should follow IJB's established meeting protocol, including around the use of the chat facility, and that comments made that chat facility available to all participants in the meeting, which may include members of the public who also receive invite to this meeting. Thank you. Item number 1 is any apology substitute declaration of interest. Diane, you want to do a roll call maybe as well?
Yeah. We have the following apologies for absence. We have Jonathan Hines with Audrey Howard substituting, Diana Cohen with Kirsty Reichel substituting. I think Kirsty had indicated she was attending, but I don't see her. Laura,
yes, on the screen.
Laura Moore, Stephen McLaughlin, Gemma Eardley, and Craig Gibbon with Marie Kears substituting. Chair, we now move to a roll call. We're asking for declarations of interest. And the following members please indicate if they're present at the meeting, either in person or remotely. Councillor Moran.
In the chambers.
Alan Cowan.
Present in the chambers.
Councillor McCluskey.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Quinn.
Present in the chamber.
Councillor Reynolds.
Present in the chamber.
And Caroline Burns.
Present in the chamber.
David Gould.
Online.
Dr. Metcalf.
Yeah, present online.
Kate Rocks.
Present in the chamber.
Apologies from Jonathan. Audrey Howard.
Present in the chamber.
Marie Kears.
Present in the chamber.
Dr. McDonald.
Online.
Dr. Jones. Kirsty Reichel.
Online.
Charlene Elliott.
Online.
Margaret Tate.
Present in the chamber.
Christina Boyd.
Present in the chamber.
Are there any declarations of interest?
I'm on the board of the Carer Centre. I'm on chair of board of Your Voice.
Right, thank before I start the meeting formally, can I firstly welcome three new members, my colleague Sandra Reynolds, Dr. Becky Metcalf, and David Goldwood, to over the chair of the report. So, welcome everyone. The first item agenda is annual report, IGP control of budget financial year 2023 and Marie Kears.
Thanks, Chair. I'm happy to present the audited annual accounts for 22-23 and the associated audit opinion. I'd just like to formally thank the finance team for all their work and others for their input to the annual accounts process this year. There have been no changes to the bottom line following the external audit of the annual accounts, with minimal adjustments required to presentational items and a small adjustment to the pension figures for paid given held within the remuneration report. The recommendations are set out in the report at section 2, and it's just worth noting that a further version of the Appendix D ISA 260 report from KPMG, who are the external auditors, will come to the November meeting of the IJB, which will then add in the scope of the wider scope audit and the base value audit as well. So this report is considered in the annual financial statements for the annual accounts. I'm happy to take any questions.
Is there any questions? Alan?
Chair, I wonder if it's worth just, so you obviously weren't present, but the audit committee met an hour ago under David Gould, and the audit committee looked at this with KPMG, the independent auditor. So we had time to look at this in detail. It's a fairly technical report, it's an annual report. But I wonder if David Gould could give, at your invitation, could give the board a broad level of assurance of the scrutiny already done to this report before we have any other detailed questions. I think that might help many board members. So maybe asking David just.
Thank you, Chair. Yourself, thank you, Alan. As Chair of the Audit Committee, I am very happy to do that. As Alan said, we took the time to read through the report, the annual report and accounts, and scrutinise them in some detail. We met with Christopher Paisley from our external auditors, KPMG, and having taken the time to question him and Marie and Kate, as well as the wider team, we are very much, and I as the chair, am very much content to recommend that the recommendations within section 2 of the agenda item, in terms of giving authority to accept and sign off the final accounts, consider the letter of representation to approve the signing off by Kate as Chief Financial Officer, and noting the content of ISA 260. I would give the board our assurance that we have looked at that and we are content with everything that we have received in terms of answers to questions, and would say, yes, please do go ahead with signing that, subject to any questions that may be raised at this board.
Thank you, David. I have a question from Colin McDonald. Colin? No. All right, sorry. Go on, you keep me.
That's okay.
Right.
Feel free
Right.
to ask
Is everybody any questions? No. Agreed, reporter?
Agreed.
Done.
Agenda item 3 is Inverclyde Integration Board minutes of the last meeting. Anyone, any questions for the minutes? Page 3, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34. Anyone get any question on them? No, quite happy to accept that?
Yeah.
Okay. Item 4 is the annual performance report, and the Chief Officer, Kate Ford, is going to talk us. Kate.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just going to take you through just a summary of our annual performance report. So the purpose of the report is to provide an update to the IGB on the overall performance of the Inverclyde Health and Social Care Partnership. The Public Bodies Scotland Act, AS 2014, requires annual performance report to be produced and presented to the IGB, highlighting performance and delivering against the national wellbeing outcomes and progress on the strategic plan. It also provides, as the IGB has delegated responsibility for services, annual performance report also provides an update on performance in relation to progress for national outcomes for children and families and criminal justice outcomes. Report is quite different this year, is in that we have extended our performance scorecard to include
The indicators agreed by the IGB and the four scorecards are included, which are the National Integration Indicators, the Ministerial Steering Group Indicators, our local strategic plan indicators, and our local government benchmark framework. So within each of them, we have included a big action section that provides examples of good practice, which includes case studies, because it can become a very dry document without the qualitative element if we don't move from quantitative to the qualitative. The purpose of today's report is to ask the IGB to know and approve the submission of our annual performance report to Scottish Government, and I'm quite happy to take any questions in relation to the report.
Christina Ward.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to raise my usual right, which I've raised on many occasions over a number of years. On page 31, where it gives you the satisfaction rating, and it tells you that the satisfaction rating for carers who feel that they're supported in a caring role is 29%. Now, I know this particular survey isn't necessarily done every year, but I have sat here on several occasions when it's come through, and the percentage of carers who are happy that they're being supported is almost the same. It's 28, 29, 30, 31, which is very, very poor in comparison to what the percentage rate of people who are happy with certain other services are. It's poor, and to be frank, it's not made any progress in the years I've been here. It's always hovering around the 30%, which I feel is disappointing. Just the second thing I just want to ask, because I haven't quite understood it. There's plenty of things in here I haven't understood. The one I particularly didn't understand, I was just asking for a bit of clarification. It was on page 39. It's talking about self-directed support, and there's a number 17. I don't know if that means 17 people are taking self-directed support or 17% people are taking self-directed support. I was just wondering if somebody could clarify what that figure meant for me.
Could I ask Christina, just for my help, just to get a sense, what is it, 30?
Page 39, strategic plan, indicator number, headed off.
Strategic plan.
Indicator number off page 39.
We're dealing with the performance reports.
And it's the third one down.
Okay, so I've been looking at maybe I'm trying to type it.
Page 39.
What is number 21?
22, page 22 on the actual
22,
report, it's 39 on the papers.
Okay, so, right, sorry, two different, I don't have the paper number, so
Right.
I've just got the strategic plan number. So can you tell me what?
Yeah, it's
That one down.
it's just hold on just here at this.
Like, number of people?
SP1 4.3, number of people taking self-directed support.
So 17 doesn't, it doesn't, I do take your point that there needs to be probably an explanation of each of these indicators, because there are a number of indicators. So that would be about the rate, but we'll get that clarified, whether that's the rate per 1,000 or it's the rate nationally.
Yeah, I just
will
interested to
check that. Yeah,
thank you.
okay.
What was that question, Christina? Page 33.
No, the other thing I was just making a general point, this one that I made before, is every time this survey comes out that the percentage of carers who feel supported, there's never any change in it. It's hovering around the 30 mark, which is very poor. And I've sat several times at meetings like this and been told, yeah, we'll do, we will try to improve. But then when the next survey comes out, it's still hovering around 30%. So my concern is that we haven't really made much progress in that over the years that I've been here.
So I'm happy that we think about putting a specific actions within the new strategic plan and strengthening that. So what you measure counts, what you count measure. That's the
That'd be brilliant.
Okay.
Thank you.
Alan and then Sandra.
Thanks, Chair. I mean, just to that last point, I mean, it's by no way a defence of that figure, because like you, I've circled it as well and said to myself, why are we not making any impact here? But in the audit report that we've just approved, deep in the detail, on page 21, but deep in the detail, it actually gives you the national figure for that piece of data as well. And it's clearly the worst performing outcome indicator in the country. So it's not just Inverclyde that's not doing well. Nowhere around the country is doing well. I don't say that as a defence, simply to provide context to your point, because you make it every time. It's valid to make, and it's clear that the nation is not making any progress on this particular outcome indicator. But it's just to give some balance in that discussion.
Just because everybody else is bad, which they are, I mean, Alan's right, they are bad right through the country, but you know, maybe we could lead it and
We can be better.
get some improvement.
Maybe Chair could send on an email to that effect. We can take it down to the point for the next one.
I suppose we've kind of already made agreement that when we move in here and new strategic plan, we need to put much more of an emphasis, particularly around the impact for carers coming out of the pandemic. So I'd be keen if you did that bit of work.
Okay. Alan?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So I had 5 general points. I'll be very quick. I mean, to that point, I suspect the first thing and I've made lots of notes here, but I'll very simplify this quickly. I think there's lots of information and data here. Lots of it's really helpful, and I hope that we use it to inform the strategic plan work next year. Because if we don't do that, I think it's an opportunity missed. And in that regard, the point that's just been made by Christine is valid. Here's an area that we know that nationally we're struggling on. How do we take that information and focus resources and time and effort in trying to be a little bit better locally than the rest? So I think the first thing is about data. It's really rich, and I hope we're able to use that and draw on it. I think the second point is it's really transparent. We're really clear about what we're doing well, but we're also quite clear about what we're struggling with and what we could be doing better with and what we're challenged by. So I think there's a strong air of transparency in it, which gives me some assurance. I like the idea that we're committed continually to try and focus more on outcomes. I think that's easy to say, more difficult often to do, but I think it's helpful that that's expressed and that we hold you to account for that over time. So I think the whole business of looking at outcomes is a really important part of this. Something that we talked about in the last meeting was about localities. I'm keen to see that we energise the whole business of how localities help to inform local priorities and fight their way into the resource space. So I think that's a strong theme that's in there as well. And the final point, which I've seen Glasgow use because I sit in Glasgow, and again it's in here, is we're committed to, because this is a big read for anybody, for a board member. It's not something the public's going to tackle. I'm keen that we deliver on the commitment to the easy read version. I think Glasgow has a single page. They managed to boil this all down to a page or two, back to front, with a few graphs, some summaries, some key information. I think that would be a huge achievement, and that would help to empower localities to engage with us. So those are my themes. I think that's a really, really good example of good data there that we can use. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I completely agree about the easy reads, and I think it's something that we have to do more around across the board to ensure that we're making the greatest impacts and engaging in our communities and our citizens. I suppose we've been really limited about the level of resource that is required to do easy reads. It's certainly something that we're keen to look at, and how do we do that? We've had this discussion consistently. As it stands, we don't have the resource in the HSCP, but it doesn't mean to say that we can't put that resource.
Right, Councillor Reynolds, Sandra.
Thanks, Chair. I'm new to this, so forgive me if I interpret things wrongly. I've got 3 comments very quickly. Page 31, number 19, and page 33, number 4, to do with the road discharge. As far as I understand it, we used to be really quite good at this, and it seems to have taken a dip. So just to note that, and what improvements there are, what's in place to improve that in the future. I know it's a genuine problem, but considering this area is to be quite good, and bed blocking is a problem.
Do you want us to come back in here?
Yeah, if you have.
Yeah, I think that we have really struggled last year. We struggled because we can't recruit for social care workers, so we've carried about 15%. But we did a bit of an analysis, and actually what we're actually we've brought more people out of hospital than actually we've done in any other years with a diminished level of resource. and diminished level of resource in our commission service. So we've had 20% less in our commission service because of the issues around, again, the knock on the recruitment and retention. So whilst it looks on paper that we're not doing as well as we did do, we're actually putting out more hours of care. The other thing that it probably is worth noting that we've done a lot of work, and part of the move from a home care service to a social care workforce and providing that level of succession planning and recruitment and retention is to try and close that gap. We're doing a specific bit of work around our mental health delays on the basis of the older people, because we know that they're generally older people that live in Inverclyde. And obviously our mental health delays are more system-wide delays than there are in Inverclyde, so we can generally get our own residents out of hospital much quicker than we can when we're at when we're supporting other HSCPs with their residents, which is something that we look at really, really closely. And Alan's Best is doing a whole load of work around some of the improvements. We hope to bring a paper to the IGB to look at new ways of working, to encourage us to support people at home and families, and we hope to have something in November, just to give you an example about the changes that are going to be made around how we support people to get out of hospital quickly.
Thanks, Kate, that's helpful. Thank you. One more picky thing and then a suggestion. Just in page 69, the second paragraph, there's just a typo there. You've set a grammar typo to
Right, okay, well, we have changed. Thank you. We always like that.
Page 67, I'd like to suggest that to the Big Action 5 we add vaping. Education Committee has already agreed to add vaping to schools project, alcohol, drugs, substance misuse and tobacco and drugs, and they've agreed to add vaping to their educational project. And in the interest of consistency, then I'd like to make that suggestion, considering that vaping is becoming such a problem.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be keen for us to take it back to the alcohol and drug partnership, because in many respects, some of the outcomes that we are delivering are as a result of the ADP, and I wouldn't want us to be putting something on our strategic plan when the strategic planning group that's responsible for that aren't looked at. So we will certainly have that discussion, as opposed to making any commitment here today, because we need to speak to the independent chair.
Thank you.
Thank you for that, Sandra. Yeah, very good point. The vaping, is something that seems to be out of control at the moment. I have a hand and it's David Gill. David.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much for this report. It's very comprehensive. When I was reading through it, one of the things that struck me was that as a board with the HSCP, we are very much at the end of the process. We are picking up people when they're broken, when they're injured, when they're ill. I'm wondering, and that's very much reflected in the metrics as well. What we don't seem to have are much in the way of the proactive side of things in terms of trying to change individuals' behaviours and lifestyle choices. I'm thinking of things like obesity and diabetes. So I'm wondering what is within our gift as an IGB to do that and work with our communities. Are we very much at the tail end of the process and beholden to the likes of SG and the health boards in terms of this? So I'm really interested, Kate, to know your perspective on this, because like I say, we're very much at the end of the process. We're dealing with individuals and families who need help when something's gone wrong. It's the step before in terms of trying to prevent that from going wrong in the first place. So interested to know your thoughts on that.
I think that's at our heart, actually, and how we want to progress, and hopefully the strategic plan as we move forward will give us a bit more of a narrative than we've had before about some of the early help, the early identification that we're doing. There's a lot of innovative practice that's going on within Inverclyde, and sometimes in an performance report you aren't able to pick up the nuances because the data set is prescribed or national data sets generally. Where our data set sits is our local strategic plan, and we've had that in place for 5 years, and we've tried to kind of shift it to outcomes, but we've still got a bit to go around what the outcomes are. I do wonder if it's something that we might want to consider as a development day, to do a bit of work, actually to kind of provide some of the narrative about the fantastic work that we're doing to avoid the harm for people, and I'll use that in a very universal term, in terms of the really good work that is going on within Inverclyde.
Yeah, thanks for that, Kate. I think from my perspective, it's if we don't measure it and we don't see it, then we can't get that understanding of what we are actually doing to reduce harm and to actually support individuals to avoid getting ill in the first place, to help them make healthy choices in their lifestyle. So that's, if we don't measure it, we don't see it in the performance reports, it makes it really difficult to assess. So I would very much welcome that in terms of a development day. That would be very helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Cameron Burns for the NHS. It's interesting, this report, we're talking about stuff that we're trying to achieve. Can I ask you, in regards to the teams that we have here, you say we refer it back to the drug and alcohol team, but what about the health promotion team? We would refer back to them, the ones that used to do stuff, and used to do preventative stuff in schools. So where are we supporting that, or have you stopped doing drug and alcohol with the health promotion team, get into the schools and that?
I'll hand you over to Gail. We were talking about the alcohol and drug partnership as opposed to alcohol and drug teams, but I'll hand it over to Gail.
Thanks for yourself, Chair. So yes, as part of the alcohol and drug partnership, there is a prevention education subgroup, and that is very much led by, and it is very much about that sort of education in schools and things. I think probably one of the issues we've had in DDP is a real sort of pressure on personnel within DDP, but that prevention education subgroup, they will be taking forward that piece of work within schools, within education. I think as we start to look at the new ADP strategy, we'll pick up with the ADP whether they want to pick up the bit around vaping, but also what does that prevention education subgroup focus on for the next 3 years. And so we'll certainly be coming back to ADP and that, but that's where that piece of work sits within prevention education.
Thanks, Gail. Chair, the team is a very small team, very, very, very small. And so is your health improvement team. So we're can talk about prevention. And I've been here long enough and used to work in Inverclyde, so is it prevention and the youth team? And I think we're lacking in stuff that should have been done a few years back. We're all wanting to stop young people changing their lifestyle, then we should be starting at the roots of it, and that's in schools. And I think we're failing in the IGI to make sure that's been happening in the last couple of years. It's just an observation on it.
Thank you.
I suppose that it's about it's the interface between what our alcohol and drug services do and what the wider partnership does, and we work in partnership. So we've commissioned education to do bits of work through the alcohol and drug partnership. So there's certainly a strong presence of perhaps maybe not always having to be delivered through the health and social care partnership, but delivered across the council and the third sector in that area. This is something that is looked at consistently by the ADP chair. I mean, we had a fantastic day yesterday, what was it yesterday? Saturday, around the recovery walk, and it just, the strength of the offer in Inverclyde across the third sector is phenomenal. And we know that young people are at the heart of it, so the ADP plan does focus on that, and we're one of the contributors, and it's making sure that we continue to look at that early help and what that looks like, because we can't just deliver it ourselves, we have to deliver it through our commission services or within our wider council partners, and our community development service provides a lot of that really good work for us too.
Thanks, Chair. I beg to to differ because I was in health improvement and know the background of it. I'm just concerned that we're speaking here to try and influence young people and shape behaviour change. I think we're lacking in doing that. That's just my observation. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Max. Does anybody else get any comments to make on the board report? No. The recommendations that I gave you notes, the 2020 annual performance report, and the proof of submission to the report covered. So would it be that?
Agreed.
The hand.
That's that, actually. Sorry, I don't see it.
Yeah, it's really just to reiterate what Anne Cameron Burns was saying. My speciality is accident and emergency, and I have to say that whatever education young people are getting, it's not sinking in or they're not getting it, because the amount of young people that we see coming into the accident and emergency that have alcohol and drug issues is huge. So I completely agree with Anne that I think we need to be doing more in school. We need to catch them when they're younger. And I know, unfortunately, a lot of that's to do with how they've been brought up as well and the examples that they've been set at home. But I think, yeah, I have to completely back my colleague, have to back Anne on the fact that I think we need to be doing more. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I just say, going forward, if you want to raise your hand or put in the chat, because I never see Christian there, you know, so if you've got a question, either raise your hand or in the chat so I can see it. So thank you for that. So anyway, that was the report. So we agree with the recommendations that goes forward with Scottish Government. Thank you. Item 5 is the annual report, clinical care and governance. And I think Dr. McDonald.
Thanks. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes, we can, Hector.
Thanks. So this is our annual clinical and care governance report that we prepare for the board's clinical governance group. It's a requirement for all partnerships to do this on an annual basis. It really documents the work in clinical and care governance throughout the health and social care partnership. So it really is a collaborative effort, this paper, although I and myself and my colleague Anne-Marie Long edit this, the work contained therein obviously is a reflection of the work that goes on through the partnership. I think I suppose the main thing to draw your attention, or one thing to draw your attention to, is that in previous years when we've brought these reports, one of the comments that we'd had in the past was about, you know, how we kind of weave in sort of real life examples and real life stories into these type of reports. And I think the introduction of care opinion, are a new system which helps to sort of gather stories from patients, and as you can see from the end of the paper, it demonstrates maybe a sluggish start to getting people using that, partly because it was introduced just before the pandemic, but certainly it seems to be more widely used now, and it gives us the opportunity to capture some of those real stories, because often people's experiences go across more than one service, you know, and that captures their whole journey through their health and social care journey. So obviously this is a paper for noting. I would be happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you, Dr. Bell. Did anyone get any questions on the report for Dr. Bell? Don't see it on the chat, there you go. So that's fine, thanks,
Alan.
Hold on, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it wouldn't be fair to not. So Hector, thank you. I mean, always good to see the work that goes on in this space. Really vital for you know, the space that we occupy. Interested in the 2.5 time improvement in the input to care opinion. Can you just explain what we did there? Because clearly something has happened to drive the 2022 figures up from 38 to 94. And I say that because care opinion is a really valuable way to improve services. So it's a principle that we might be able to adopt in other parts of what we do. So maybe just some thoughts about how we managed to roll out that increase. I know it exists. It's often you've got to Google to find it. So maybe just some thoughts on what you did there, because it looks like a bit of a success.
Yeah, so I suppose colleagues that are not here today are probably the ones that have been most important in this. Anne-Marie Long, who's our clinical and care governance support officer, and Laura Moore, who I think is on leave today, were very important in doing this, Alan. I think a lot of this was around raising awareness. So there were development days, for staff, or awareness days for staff. And there were, Anne-Marie reached out to individual teams and services to try and, raise awareness, and also, raise awareness of how they might, make this first and foremost, in people's vision. So, putting on sort of leaflets, using QR codes so that people could just obviously scan it with their smartphone. So there's been a lot of kind of work done, which as I said, my colleagues Anne-Marie and Laura have been very heavily involved in. I think partly as well, coming out of the pandemic has allowed more time to dedicate to that. But probably the numbers are still not. We'd probably like to see bigger numbers still, but getting there.
So Chair, thanks. Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's valuable in my mind is that we are openly prepared to listen to our stakeholders tell us that we're not doing well. Quite often when we talk about care opinion, it's a 2/3, 1/3 issue. You get a lot of stuff of people saying we had a really great experience, but it's really valuable to hear that other third of where we've not actually met their needs for a variety of reasons, because that's where we'll probably learn how to do stuff differently. So I just think it's a really good example that we've made some progress engaging with our stakeholders and helping to understand where we can improve as well as what we might be doing well. So I'm just reasserting what I said, I guess. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I suppose the only other thing I would say is that, I suppose particularly with morale in the post-pandemic period, I know what you're saying, the 2/3, 1/3, and I think, but it's actually good to have this sort of negative mixed in with the positive, because you're always taught when you're teaching to kind of feed back to people and start with the positive. And I think if people receiving these feedback, the services repeating these feedback are saying, well, look, you're doing some things very well, but actually there's some things you could improve on, it tempers and it makes it different from just trawling through complaints. So it is quite a useful way of measuring feedback, I think.
Thank you. Anyone get any questions on? Okay, I give these actually wrote the annual report on Dr. McDonald. Item 6 is the chief officer report. Okay, I'm going to call Kate Faulkner on floor. I promoted you, Kate Faulkner, you're back there. I know.
Hold on, I can just. So, the chief officer's report, there's some points of accuracy just in the chief officer's report. I'll take you through and I want to know about that. So, this is more a report about giving you an update as to some of the business that's going on, but at this stage hasn't required paper. So, just to take you through the community hub is. We're updating as it stands at this moment in time, in real time. We haven't had any other further update from council about where the building warrants are, but as far as we're aware, that we continue to kind of work through as it stands, and we don't really have any other update unless, Alan, I know that you were meeting with individuals. You want to give another update?
Yes, Al.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, just working with our colleagues in service and our building services, property services, in terms of doing the financial costings at present, and I've got a meeting this week to see where we are with it. I think it's probably at the moment just working through the kind of minutiae of the various costings, but we are progressing with it, and I would hope that pretty soon we'll be in a position for that financial information to come back.
Okay, so I'm going to kind of hand over the GP list closures to Dr. McDonald, who has been in the midst of working through some of the developments with the GPs and some of the risks within the GPs. It's very straightforward how it's been described within the Chief Officer's report. I would want to kind of add that it is wider than just asylum seekers and foreign nationals, and it is more representative of the whole system too. So it isn't just it kind of cites that. We obviously have seen a greater footprint in Inverclyde around foreign nationals coming in per head of population, but that in itself isn't causing the difficulty. So I just wanted that to be clear within the report. So I can hand it over to yourself, Hector.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose the main thing is to reassure the committee that that at present, although we have some GP practice list closures at present, we are working collaboratively with the practices, both those that are closed presently and those that are open, to try and get everybody back open again as soon as possible. I would also like to just stress for all members that closed lists means closed to new registrations. It does not mean closed, to normal day-to-day work. Obviously, as Kate said, that there were significant pressures on practices dating back some time. In essence, the reason for the new GP contract has been GST pressures on practices, but I think we faced earlier on, just before the summer, a sort of a perfect storm of increased registrations due to the population groups that Kate has mentioned, but as well as some GP ill health and retirements, and the ongoing issue with recruitment. As I say, we have been continuing to support the practices through this, and we do have a plan working with them to try and get out of this situation. I think it's important to stress as well that we do have mechanisms in place so that any new arrivals to Inverclyde, anyone seeking to get a GP practice, can still access a GP practice. The choice may not be as wide as before, and they may be allocated a practice rather than be able to join the one of their choice, but there is still there will be still a GP for everybody that moves to the area. I think that's the key message.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, Chair, if there's any specific questions.
Okay.
Martin.
Thanks, Chair. Trying to work out where to sort of begin with this, because it kind of opens up a whole host of issues. I think, firstly, it's a worrying development that we've had to close, or GPs have had to close lists, especially given we already know that there was pressure both among GPs and dental practices. So it does kind of raise questions about the access in Inverclyde to primary care more generally. And I understand what Dr. McDonald was saying about what this obviously affects new registrants, but we already know the impact that COVID and the result of COVID has had on availability of GP appointments and the pressures that exist on the systems. I suppose I've got a specific point and a more general point. The specific point on why the lists have become overwhelmed in some areas. Like, the paper obviously talks about asylum seekers and foreign nationals, but as you yourself said, Kate, the pressure on the system even before we had that pressure was significant, and is the result of a number of factors, including, I would argue, poor workforce planning that's led to us having a shortage of GPs, not just here but across the country. But when it comes to the asylum seekers and foreign nationals, there's a question in my head about where this goes in future. So, we know that there's 175,000 people across the UK sitting on an asylum in an asylum backlog because of the appalling way that the government has managed asylum. We know that the UK government has proposed doubling up in hotel rooms. So I suppose the question then is, has that happened in Inverclyde in terms of the doubling up, and what representations are we making to the Home Office to say we are potentially in a position where we can't sustain a further increase? You know, aside from all the reasons why you don't want to accommodate people in hotels, because it is not the correct way to accommodate vulnerable people, it's clearly causing an impact and could potentially be doubled. So that's the specific question on the asylum hotels. More generally, and I think this is something that it's kind of, I've personally argued for years, and I know others around the table have argued for years, that Inverclyde has been shortchanged in terms of health services locally in a whole variety of areas. But we are obviously an authority that has promoted repopulation. We have a strategic objective as Inverclyde Council to promote repopulation in the area. And what we're reading here is that with relatively small numbers of people arriving in the area, it's become overwhelmed. So it raises a question for me about the sustainability. We need to repopulate, but how do we repopulate if our health services locally become so overwhelmed with a small number of people, a far smaller number than we need if we're actually to reverse the depopulation in the area? So that's a broader point I think the board probably needs to think about. You know, why is it, and perhaps this is a question that Hector can address, you know, why is there so little resilience in the system? And if we are to repopulate, how do we deal with the lack of resilience in the system around GPs? I'll leave it there. Thank you.
So, if you don't mind, Chair, I'll come in. First of all, can I bring in Alan Best about the wider asylum seeking and migrant population, about what we're actually doing to answer your question and hopefully provide a level of reassurance, and then maybe move to Dr. McDonald to kind of answer some about the issues about the resilience and what else can we do. Okay, so I'll hand it over to you, sir.
Very well, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, just to kind of come in terms of the kind of the immigration question, there's multiple strands to this. We need to bring out as well. There's people here who are entitled to be within the UK because, you know, they've been through the appropriate processes. In terms of the contingency hotel, we've been liaising very closely with COSLA and the Home Office in terms of, you mentioned the doubling up about basically that we don't think that's an appropriate thing to do. It's not the best thing to do for the individuals themselves nor the environment they're in. So we put very strong representation back to the Home Office about that in terms of some of the legislation in Scotland around houses of is it considered a house of multiple occupancy? So that's something that we're doing at present and continue to do. And in the last meeting with the Home Office representatives, I think it's fair to say that they realise it's not just a simple case of doubling up. You know, in fact, some of the preparations they've made there suspended because of some of the queries that we've raised about the individuals there. We've also put in additional healthcare in terms of nursing support to help the individuals that are within the contingency hotel, and obviously the wider work that we do in terms of the very good work done around supporting nationals from Ukraine that have come to Scotland because of a very, very difficult situation in their own land. So we are putting in additional support there to help support the wider healthcare system. But it's a position that we're constantly monitoring in terms of the Scotland work that we're doing. And we need to remember we've also got schemes around Afghan nationals and Syrian nationals who have been through a scheme and have now been granted the right to reside in the UK and are making a very positive impact in terms of our local community. So it's a complicated picture, but it's something I've hoped to give reassurance to the IGIP that we have multiple liaisons with both COSLA, Scottish Government and the Home Office and the local position.
Yeah, I would want to reassure that we've made a very strong stance around the doubling up, that we would deal with that in terms of the Scottish legislation. It is suffice to import that policy within the context of multiple occupancy. We're still waiting an answer from the Home Office, so we have written We're still waiting for an answer, and it was the Chief Executive of the Council that sent the letter. And it was the Council and the HSCP that made that representation, so we're hoping that at least that consideration will be given to that. We also do individual risk assessments with around whether that's an appropriate policy for the individuals. So it's quite robust, our representations on a daily basis when decisions change. And we're very clear that if any balance changes, that further discussions needs to be undertaken because of the impact it's got on primary care services. Because we want to welcome people into Inverclyde, and part of welcoming them is to ensure that they've got basic access to primary care services, and that's something that we want to talk to the GPs about when they start opening up those, about how better we can support them by doing maybe things a bit differently than what we would have done in the past. But I'll hand it over to Hector, and he might be able to give you a bit more answer to the more clinical aspects of the questions or the assurance.
Yeah, I mean, I think you and Alan Best have covered really quite a lot of it there. I just suppose responding to Councillor McCluskey's point regarding a relatively small number overwhelming. I think if people are overwhelming the system, I think it's the I suppose the intensity of the arrival of some of the groups coming in a short space of time. And I think that just by the geography of the area, there's been several of the practices that have had to bear the brunt of the increased registrations in the area. And as you acknowledged, it's really not just simply that. I'd outlined that there were other issues involved as well, such as GPs retiring, some GP ill health as well at the time. And obviously, with us being quite a small area, we don't have as many practices to spread that workload over. And the purposes in the closure were to allow the practices to spend some time and come up with a plan and a way of working together with us and with each other in order to minimise the risk of this happening again. So I acknowledge it's been concerning for people, but we do see things improving, and hopefully over the next few weeks we'll be out of the current situation that we're in.
The question first. Thank you.
That's fine. Yeah, it's just to kind of touch on it. Just previously we were talking about our sort of new ways of working and the support to GPs. Just obviously you're talking about that and the added pressure. I can totally understand why a practice would close, to try and, catch up pretty much from COVID times. I use the health service myself. I've been actually shocked now that the doors are opening, the amount of things that they're actually dealing with on a day-to-day. Unfortunately, I've witnessed, actually every time I've been in the health centre, I've witnessed the abuse that some staff have taken. So the pressure is there on the staff on a daily basis, and the pressure they're under. And actually the first couple of minutes of the doctor's appointment, I actually sat down and I asked the GP, were they okay? Because then they said this isn't just a one-off, this is every day that they're chasing their tail. So really we need to worry about the health of our GPs before they can actually work on the health of their communities. So I'm just trying to, this isn't going to go away immediately. So when we started talking about new ways of working, and trying to relieve that pressure from our GPs, so how are we getting on with that? Is there certain other areas that we can then help in terms of relieving that immediate pressure from them?
I presume you want me to come back in. I think as Councillor McCluskey touched on earlier, one of obviously the barriers to introducing or implementing the new contract, obviously that was really across the pandemic, was part of the issue. Obviously funding, full funding of the contract has been another issue, and clearly, as was mentioned earlier, recruitment and retention as well. You know, we have, for example, with advanced nurse practitioners, we have trained many advanced nurse practitioners who have subsequently left for you know, jobs elsewhere that have bluntly had a better salary. Obviously, the NHS is tied to salary scales, but where other organisations may not be. So, you know, it's a very complex issue which we've touched on in the past, and I'm pleased you bring up the subject of, you know, obviously the well-being of our health care staff, because I think that is a significant issue, and it obviously has been the reason behind the decisions that we took to allow some of the practices to close to prevent that becoming such a significant issue. And that is at the forefront of our minds, you know, when we're looking after our staff, because most of our staff probably feel they didn't, and I know that Kirsten's on the call here as well, the A&E staff, I'm sure the same, that, you know, we had the pandemic, and then, you know, people have not really had a chance to recover from that in terms of staff, and we're facing you know, these issues with increased demand on our services, and as you point out, just frustration from people sometimes boils over, and that leads to staff being you know, abused as well. So yes, it's a very topical issue, but I thank you for raising the issue of well-being, which I think is an important one, and you know, was obviously part of our decision to allow these closures, to allow practice to recover to some extent.
Okay,
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I'm conscious that Kate will want to make progress here. I know we've covered a lot of ground in this discussion, all of it relevant in some sense, but I bring us back to what the IGB is responsible here for. But my sense would be that the IGB is responsible for ensuring that it can deliver the delegated service that is primary healthcare, and in doing that those who are entitled to access that have support to do so. And in that regard, whilst I don't diminish the impact that we're talking about here, I'm reasonably assured that we're not sitting on our hands here, that activity is going on to support those folks who are impacted by the closures through practitioner services, which is the entry point into getting a secondary practice somewhere else. And maybe that's the area we might come back to at some time and seek assurance that we understand how that works, and the length of time people are waiting, and frankly that no one's being left behind. But that's the area that I would suggest the board needs to focus on. That's the area that's our responsibility. The other things are relevant and interesting, but not necessarily solvable in this board.
Okay, I think that I feel that we've exhausted this agenda item, or well, maybe not.
Christina, sorry.
I am conscious of the time. We're trying to get through
Yeah, can I just ask you a quick question? On the delayed discharges, the last paragraph for that, it's talking about increasing the quality to cost ratio, 70% quality, 30% cost.
Not got to that bit yet.
We're not at that bit yet.
No, I'm trying to get to that.
I will try to change that
bit. Okay, so if I can move on to the delayed discharges, and we have picked up some of the issues around the delayed discharges in our earlier discussion around the annual performance report. What we haven't picked up is that our changes in our quality to cost ratio. Now, this is not a matter for the IGB to consider, it's a matter for its council standing order. So I'm pleased to say that the Policy and Resources Committee of the council, that ratio was agreed. At the time I wrote it, it was agreed. So it was agreed around the quality and cost ratio. And we are then we're moving forward to look at our balance in our internal home care by 80% to 20%. And there'll be a future report that comes to the IGB in November that allows you to see the financial the financial shift around the delivery from commission services to the 80%. And just for people to note, it was 60-40 for the internal and external. And before that, it was 40-60. So it was 40 on cost, 40 on quality, and 60 on cost. So it's quite a significant change in how people go out and go forward in our home care agenda in terms of the store.
Very Christina.
Right. I've got it. Thank you.
Martin.
Thanks, Robert. Just what discussions are we having with the Scottish Ambulance Service about delayed discharge? Or would that just sit at a board level? I'm just conscious, I've usually had an experience with a family member where we waited 7 hours after ready to discharge to make a 7-minute trip. And that's something I've heard from a lot of constituents as well. So whereas I noticed it's mentioned care support at home, the social care packages and user installations to legal issues, but what about transport? Thanks.
Al?
Yeah, thank you. Well, thanks. That is, you're right, that's one of the many bits of the jigsaw in terms of ensuring that a discharge is hopefully as seamlessly as possible. So at a kind of national level and local level, we're continually linking in the services to try and see if we can make improvements and to ensure that folk are not unnecessarily delayed. You know, we know that many cases of delays are caused by other issues that literally means that we can't actually move something from our home, but it is frustrating when you're literally waiting in the transport. We saw during COVID, we looked at local initiatives in terms of where there was a medical need for transport and there was a social transport, finding alternatives for that. So that's something that we're continuing to work with the Scottish Ambulance Service and our care managers as well, about trying to find ways out so folk aren't unnecessarily late. But as Kate was saying earlier, we're also looking at, when we look at the amount of activity where we have successfully and seamlessly ensured that somebody's returned to their own home, that it's hard to see that activity has from last year increased in a very positive direction. So there's still work to be done in that, but I think we can say that we're making positive inroads, but certainly I'd be happy at a future meeting to come back in that specific bit of jigsaw.
That'd be helpful. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no other questions about this bit, I'll move on to the ADP, and I would just want to say it's pretty straightforward. Could I just say that the IGP is asked to note and not approve? Okay, that's a typo, and we'll ask for noting. And then if I can move on to the drug deaths. Unfortunately, the drug death data come out, and it's quite sad to report that we're seeing again a swing of the pendulum. We thought we were going down, but we're going back up. And actually we're still higher than the Scottish average. So we're away to kind of the EDP will be doing a lot of work to get underneath that, because not all drug deaths are known to the alcohol or the HSCP. Actually, I think about Gail will be able to provide you, she's geared up to do that, by the looks of it. And Gail will be able to provide you with some of the data to provide a bit more detail. And obviously the rollout of our naloxone is very positive from where it was. So that's certainly having an impact, but the nature of the drug use within Inverclyde has changed quite substantially over the last few years, where you've got polypharmacy going on. So,
yeah.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just on behalf of that ADP, actually, obviously, from a governance point of view, within the Alcohol and Drug Recovery Service itself, we have a governance process where we look at all deaths within our own service. But from an ADP perspective, we have what's called a drug death review group, so that includes all the partners, and we're looking at that, the numbers, and we'll be doing some of the monitoring around that, just to see if there's any missed opportunities that we could have had to try and get people into treatment. As Kate said, we probably have about just over half of our people who were in treatment at the time that they died. About a quarter of them were on medication assisted treatment, but for about half of the people, they weren't within our service. So something that we want to work across the partners to say who else were they known to, and how do we better support people into treatment where they need that. But obviously quite a lot of work going on with our recovery partners about getting people into recovery support, into residential rehab where it's appropriate, and working very much with our partners to try and increase that education and prevent any drug cards to people. So quite a lot of work going on through the ADP just now. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm happy to move on.
Yes.
So I just want to kind of highlight the homelessness service.
Yeah.
It's very self-explanatory and say well done to the staff, because it has been a very challenging time, particularly coming out of a pandemic, implementing a new way of working. But actually for us, that is such a significant feedback about the leadership and the quality of the support that perhaps wasn't as prevalent in other inspections that we've had in the past. And obviously the homelessness service is still subject to ongoing redesign, and we hope to provide a further paper about what we think that will look like moving forward. I would also like to kind of outline that within, irrespective of the outcomes of the care inspection, the team submitted an application in Scotland's Housing Awards, and actually I think out of the 7 categories have been shortlisted for 6. So I think that's a real indictment about the direction of travel and the type of support. And so we're really looking forward to seeing what the outcome will be on the 27th of October. And on the 28th, the IGB will be here. I'll let them know. And then the next thing, just to add, is the recovery walk. It was a fantastic.
Charlie wants to comment on that. Charlie.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, it was just actually in relation to 4.4, the ADPR annual survey. It was just actually to take the opportunity to highlight the fantastic partnership working that's happening through the Resilience Network in relation to producing the module on challenge stigma. The module is focused on recovery, and it will actually be launched on Wednesday this week. It was deliberately being launched after the recovery walk, which took place at the weekend, which is a fantastic event. But that module has been created by most third sector organisations that are involved in recovery, with representatives from the ADP, NHS Health Improvement, and people with lived and living experience. There's actually been some great feedback from the manager at one of the houses that participated, and said that their participants had actually taken a new approach to their recovery, and they had seen a real change in terms of their confidence and self-esteem as a result of taking part in the challenge stigma steering group. So I just really wanted to take the opportunity as part of this Chief Officer's report to highlight that fantastic example of partnership working across the third sector and public sector in the community in Inverclyde. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie.
And if I just move on to the recovery walk, just to note, it's fantastic again for us, and that it gave a real flavour and sense of community, and the joined upness between all of the partners, council, HSC and third sector. I think it was a day to be proud of. Yeah, well, Mark McCluskey now was accent for our colleagues, so fantastic. Yeah. Great day, and it's good to see so many people there under one volunteer. A lot of staff was here. I met the team for homeless service here. It was really nice to speak to them. No, it was a fantastic day, and it never rained, I have to say. I never tried it best. I know, I'm not everybody forward. Oh, Karen would have to do as well. She was leading they were in front. So it's a great day, and to see the people in the recovery journey, it's fantastic. Alan and then Sam.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Very quickly, so Kate, thank you for all of that. Thanks for getting through it. It's a lot of stuff there. On the homelessness service, it's good to see the independent assessment of just how well it's led, comparing it to obviously other models, but a positive output there in an area which I know, and this is me straining a bit of the political stuff here, that I know locally people have felt is a very poor service or whatever. So good to see an independent assessment given and some strengths there. The question I've got is, I know we're committed, or you're committed, to bring a paper that will sketch out how we might redesign the service and produce something that's fit for the 21st century. So the question is, when might we see that sort of work? When might that come back to the IGP?
It will come in November.
Thank you.
Sandra.
Just very quickly, Kate, because I knew that you wanted to move on from drug deaths. Can I just comment on the naloxone? We had last week and talking to the police afterwards. They have used that locally. One instance he highlighted in the waterfront, the patient had needed about 4 shots of naloxone, was taken to hospital with by ambulance, and his life was saved. But it was quite traumatic that he was kind of turned around saying this works and promote it, etc. The other question I have is there's been a rise in drug deaths in the northeast of England from synthetic opioids that are I'm really worried about coming into the country. I'm sure you're aware of that, and any kind of plan to cope with them. These are said to be 400 to 600 times as potent as heroin.
I think this is some of the work that the ADP does, and part of our drug deaths. I think our profile of our users are quite different now because of the polypharmacy that goes on, and that's a bit that the system needs to adjust to. So we want to do much more work around how do we target that, and particularly our younger people, bearing in mind some of the earlier comments that we had made, because it is really thoughtful. We need to stop that generational, intergenerational drug misuse within Inverclyde, and the key is young people.
Thank you.
Margaret,
Thanks, Chair. No, I just wanted to speak. I think you've covered what I was going to say about the recovery walk, how brilliant it was. Actually, I was quite curious to see roughly if they knew how many had attended, and I actually spoke to a member of the staff this morning, and they reckon about 5,000.
Right.
Which I think is brilliant. That's all. Thank you.
Right, see, before we on to that, yes, remark thank you to the homeless service. The transformation there is amazing, and it's been down to the Gael and the staff over there. And I'm so glad that we can see the results of our hard work. And the fact that we're for 6 or more just as summed up. So please send my thanks and the committees, take it back to the staff, say well done, and all the best for us. What's in.
Thank you.
Thank you, thank you.
It is.
Okay, all right, 7 is the financial audit report, and again, it's Marie.
Thank you, Chair. This is the PD financial statement as at the 30th of June 2023. At PD was shown a projected overspend across the IGB of £344,000. The social care budget is a projected underspend of £249,000, and the health budget is projected to overspend at this stage by £593,000. At this point, we haven't used any reserves to offset the position. The overspend projection is in line with the position currently being experienced across IGBs in the Greater Glasgow wide area, with many of them also projecting an overspend position. Firstly, looking at social care, children and families is projected to overspend by £1.3 million at this stage, mainly due to children's placements. Older adults has an underspend projection of £2.3 million due to current care at home vacancies and also the external care at home underspends, which are also related to recruitment and retention issues. We're hopeful that the in-house recruitment and retention will improve as a result of the care at home review and the new home support worker, the social worker, care worker paid role that's been agreed by the board. Secondly, looking at the health budget, mental health inpatients is projected to be overspent by 1.6 million and prescribing by £500,000 at this stage. This is mainly offset by vacancies across all of the main areas. At present, as I said, we haven't used any of the reserves at this time, but we will review that as the year progresses, and we'll make appropriate draws and reserves if required to address overspend. I'm happy to take any questions, and the recommendations are set out in section 2.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone, any questions?
Chair, yeah, thanks. I seem to be doing a lot of questions. So I recognise that we've got a lot of social care overspends, not uncommon to us at this point in the year. and kind of bought off by having underspends elsewhere. I guess the question is, and it's for either Kate or Marie, I don't mind, but it's just maybe some thought about what work we're doing in some of these. I know we're doing some work, but what work we're doing and how that's progressive, particularly in the, I think it's children and families, but there's clearly some big overspends there that we can't just accept year on year. We've got to work out how to design the system to accommodate that. It's just a thought about what work we're doing to fix that.
So our main spend is our external spend for children. So in the past, if you look at some of the local government benchmarking framework, they're quite very good at keeping our children within their own communities. So that's the focus of the work, is actually working alongside our sector to try and support our children, because our workforce is really stretched. We're still operating with recruitment issues irrespective of the incentives that were put in place to encourage people who are now getting grow our own. So we've put everything in place to ensure that we've got a workforce for the future, but in the short to medium term, we're still struggling with that workforce. So it's about our relationships with our third sector, and national third sector partners, about what they will do and what they can provide for us to ensure that we work in partnership and we continue to support. So there's a variety of improvement activities right down to ensuring that children, the first point access is not social work, and actually that we're ensuring that we're supporting families much earlier on before they come into crisis, and also our quality of our IRD processes right through to looking at see whether we need to commission different models of care. So the answer is there is a plan, but it will be a plan that will be working on the next 6 months and maybe further. I feel so. It's the impact when a child comes into care. It's so hard to get them back home, and particularly when they've been placed externally, it's so hard to get them back home. So our focus is trying to stop other children going into care.
Recommendation notes account period 3 forecast vision of 2020-2024, a detailed report and effect 1.3, and the assumption that we're funded from reserves. Approve the proposed budget realignments and variance of 24, and authorises the office to issue the value direction to the council and the health board required on the basis of the revised figures in Appendix 5. Notes the decision of a transformation fund, Appendix 6. Notes the current capital position, Appendix 7. Notes the current earmarked reserve in Appendix 8. And notes the key assumptions within the forecast in Section 10. So agreed, directly. I'll take it, everybody agrees with it there. The take number 8 is the role and action report, and again, it's the chief officer.
We have tried to keep this as up to date as possible. Tried to keep this up to date as possible, and we can see that most actions are closed, and the only one that remains open is the work in terms of the homelessness service, and that's scheduled to come to November.
Any question on role and actions? Okay. All right. You do that report. So number 9 is Inverclyde Joint Board Audit Committee appointment of voted member. And Vicky?
Thanks, Chair. The purpose of this report says the IJB to agree the appointment of Alan Cowan as a health board member of the IJB Audit Committee to replace Simon Carr on that state on critical.
Agreed. Well, Alan wants to be efficient.
Item 10 is the Helen Respite Unit, and Alan Best is going to take this report.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to bring the Integration Joint Board an updated position regarding the future of the currently closed Helen Respite Unit, and the intention to take forward an independent consultation with key stakeholders on the potential future of the unit. If members will be aware that the respite units are an internal respite service that prior to COVID provided residential respite. When COVID came in, as with all units of that type, it was required to close. And over the COVID period, the last couple of years, the service has remained closed. There is no unmet need in terms of respite for the service users who previously used the unit. Alternative respite and short breaks has been sought. The current position with the unit is that the staff group who previously supported the unit through natural movement has moved away and gained positions in other parts of the service. The unit itself would require, if we were to bring it back online, a recruitment process to bring in potentially just under 11 full-time equivalent. There is a financial shortfall because of changes in fire regulations and requirement and how we staff that. So what we're looking for the IJB today is a decision around the unit at the moment remains closed as it has been for the last 3 years for both service user and employees. We undertake a detailed consultation in terms of the service users and carers who used the unit previously before COVID. And we also look to see what the impact of the remaining closure has on a permanent basis in terms of future users of the service. And we look at alternative respite option provision. To do that, we would intend using an independent body to look at how we provide respite short breaks in the future and whether or not the closure of the unit plays a part in that process. And I'd be happy to take any questions.
Mark, please.
Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Alan, for this. I've got to say I'm slightly uneasy about it, I'm being honest. I think this obviously predates my time on the council, but the unit, as far as I understood it, always had a very good reputation, had very positive care inspectorate reports, and I know that we kind of ended up in the position of closure during the COVID period, and I suppose that decision, again, correct me if I'm wrong here because obviously it's before my time in the council, but that decision was one that was sort of forced on us by circumstances, and now because of the closure and the changes in the system, we're starting to decide whether or not to close it permanently. And I suppose that's what makes me uneasy about it, is that we kind of ended up in a position where the service has been, not deliberately, but has been kind of run down because of circumstances, and now we're having to make a decision about whether or not to make that permanent. And I'm just wondering if we're, given what Christina was saying earlier on about 29% figure and carers not feeling supported and respite being one of the things that really makes a difference in terms of carers feeling supported, whether we're kind of missing a trick here if we are going down this route, and whether the consultation will be of a kind of wide enough scope. I think what you said there seems to suggest it's slightly wider than the way it's maybe the way I interpreted it in the paper, but I suppose it would be good to actually have this as a consultation on how respite looks in Inverclyde full stop across the board, not just how this particular service operates, but I do think we need to ask people who are affected whether or not they think that the service should be closed or whether it should remain open. Because I suppose there are two then substance points here. One, it doesn't really seem to give me a lot of confidence about what we do with younger people, especially, who might not want to go to a care home that predominantly deals with older people. And I think second, I know in 1.6 it kind of addresses a little bit about the availability, but I know from both constituents and personal experience that bookable care homes and being able to have certainty before you try and book a break is not the experience of a lot of people. And maybe that's changed in the past. This was in January, in the 6 months between when I was trying to deal with this versus then, but it certainly wasn't my experience or that of constituents that they were easily able to book with a level of certainty in advance to be able to actually get away. It was all very, very short term. So I suppose the unease continues about the way in which we kind of got to this point. But if we are going to go down the route of consulting, then we should consult, I think, widely about the quality and provision of respite in Inverclyde. Thanks.
I'm happy to come back in. I don't disagree with that. So obviously the Hill End has been sitting there closed, and I think that we've had to go back and get a sense, particularly moving forward, about the impact. So, and I would agree that we should be looking at within the wider context around our respites and not solely just focus on Hill End. And we need to consider what that looks like for younger people, because many young people in transition, certainly, I don't think, would want to go to Hill End either because of the demographics of Hill End, and they want something different. So I think we have to look at it in its totality, and I think we'd be happy to go back and do that. But we also need to consult with the wider population too.
I don't know, Christina, Danny, but you want to answer after first you want to Christina's question.
Perhaps if Christina's question, maybe we're going to cover it.
Okay, right, that's okay, Christina.
Yeah, reading this again, I was disappointed because I was personally involved the last time when Hill End was up for closure, and we lobbied various people, some of whom are sitting around this table, and it was given a reprieve. So I think it's disappointing. I always feel that it's being closed by the back door to a certain extent. And when you're talking about consulting on the Hill End, I don't even think that's an appropriate term to use. Reading how many people you're going to have to find to work there, reading how much money you are going to have to find in order to reopen the facility properly, that's just not going to be done. You know, you're not going out to people and saying, would you like us to reopen Hill End? Because I don't think that's an honest position, and I'm sure you're not actually going to do that, because reading this, Hill End is not reopening, and why would you reopen it? Because you've got issues with cost. We had people who came to us and said they were unaware that Hill End existed. We had stories about people who said that it hadn't been properly promoted to them, and they didn't know anything about it, including people who lived in East End town who probably would have known about it. And the other thing that's concerning also is the amount of the learning disabled who formed a substantial part of the people who went to Hill End. And I mean, where are they going? What are we going to do with them? It says at some point, I think, is it? It's talking about 16 people for the learning disabled to use Hill End. 11 of those people have no unmet need. I'm not quite sure what that means. You know, they must have had some kind of need if they went to Hill End in the first place. So why have those 11 people got no unmet need? I don't know quite what that means. So I do think it's important that you're not doing a phony consultation. And by a phony consultation, I mean you're not giving people the idea that Hill End is going to be open, because I don't think anybody sitting around this table who's read the figures in there thinks that that's going to happen or that it's realistic.
I'll create a substantial question there, so.
I think it's a real opportunity here to see where we go with this, because I think it's clear pre-COVID, as we know, Hill End, I've personal experience at Hill End. It's one of my services at that time where it ran at a very reduced capacity at 68%. There was never a problem with the quality of care at Hill End. In fact, it was suspected in February 2020, where it scored 4 5s, but the issue has always been around the environment. The environment being it's a relatively small unit, its outlook wasn't particularly progressive in terms of the actual visual outlook, and also what's around the surrounding area in terms of community involvement. So I think it's fair to say there's an opportunity to look at how we provide respite, short breaks in its entirety, and to look that we're giving folk an opportunity to get an experience and outcome from the respite. the unit, as I say, the unit itself was always run under capacity, and you're correct in what you're saying, the overlearning and disability formed a fairly large proportion. In terms of that unmet need, we've been able over the last while to look at other forms of respite, alternative breaks, experiences. I think I've mentioned before at the IGID about the use of establishments that give folk outdoor experiences, the opportunity to do things like abseil, where possible, take different types of experiences. So that's part of the sort of ethos around the short breaks, alternative break, about an experience, but also to support carers. So carers will form a large part of what we need to do in consultancy. How do we support people? The unit itself at the moment, the question is that direction of travel that we want to go in? Yes, there would be issues about recruitment and retention there, but that's something that we can certainly work through. But I think it's about the more experience about how we provide alternative breaks in the future. It's interesting in terms of activity this year, just for noting, between beginning of April and August, end of August, 486 service users have received respite and alternative respite. That amounts to almost like 4,260 nights away from home in terms of supporting themselves and their carers. Care homes may or may not be the right environment. There's other environments which use short breaks like residential caravans, breakaway. Like everybody enjoys an experience of getting a long weekend away. So it's about getting the correct environment for the individual. I think that's the part of the consultation to discuss with our key stakeholders of our community is what will maximise the outcomes of the individual. So that I think that forms the direction of travel in terms of the conversation, and then we say what will be the next step.
Okay.
So just to say that in summary, I mean, from what I'm picking up, it is much wider. I mean, we apply different unit costs across the board in social care. And particularly for respite, so there's a sliding scale about what people need, and we don't have a definitive cost or unit cost even for self-directed supports when it comes to respite. We're keen to make sure that the consultation is as full and reflective. That's why we aren't doing it, and we're asking an independent organisation to do it on our behalf and make sure that part of that consideration will be looking at, is our respite offer sufficient enough, and do we provide enough choice for service users, particularly younger service users and carers, as a result of that. So I would hope that we would undertake that and the outcomes will be brought back to the IGB, because the decision making sits within the IGB, so around how we best, officers will provide proposals to the IGB, but the people around this table will be more able to kind of be part of that discussion when we get that consultation undertaken.
Martin.
Yeah, thanks, Robert. Apologies about being pedantic about this, but I just think it's a really important thing and make sure that we get it right. I think what both Kate and Alan have said throughout this is about a wider consultation, not just with existing or previous users of Hill End, but with all potential service user stakeholders, and I'd just be keen that the recommendations that we're agreeing at 2.1 to 2.3 reflects that somewhere, because the recommendations at 2.2 and 2.3 are very focused on all remaining users and carers and Hill End users and carers to review all service users of respite. There's not a lot about, as Alan used the language of future users, and I just think it's important to reflect somewhere when we agree this, that we're agreeing a slightly wider remit for it. I don't know how that's best handled.
We can add, Vicky, are they got the handle add to?
Let's just see what does 2.3 mean now. I was taking it when I read this report that what we're asking for is under 2.3, because 2.2 was about current users and 2.3 was the wider all users, potential users. So I thought 2.3 covered that.
It certainly reflects it in the minutes.
Yeah.
That's it.
Everybody's in agreement that that's what you're everybody's saying here, but that's what it was saying.
That's great. Thanks.
We reflect it.
So on that matter, 2.1, the proposed the Highland District remains closed. The extent of things I remember, I know it last year. Force service unit employees, so we're quite happy with that. Working for that, 2.1.
Happy maybe too strong a word to content with it based on what other, you know
I'm limited to that.
Yeah. I think what we're saying is we're going to have the consultations, we're going to come back, and then, you know,
Right.
2.1 will be back on the table depending on the outcomes of the consultations.
I didn't really want to contribute, but I think the essential thing for the IJB is to understand what officers bring back, tells us what the demand is likely to be for respite service in its widest sense. And as you said, there are different aspects to this, but we must understand what the demand is, because the demand drives the need and it will drive the costs. Once we understand what the demand is, it's important we understand what the existing provision looks like. Now, the question then is whether you add LEND into that discussion or not, and that's a discussion that officers can bring back.
Yeah.
But unless we understand the demand and the provision, we're not looking at the right stuff. I think I'm hearing that. I just want to make it clear for the minute.
Thank you, why works. So, are we happy with the recommendation as it stands?
Which is what it says.
The recommendation, 2.1 to 2.3.
We'll do it, Becky.
Yeah. Yes.
Are we content?
Noting the recommendations.
The recommendation mentioned 2, so it says undertaking by regulatory consultation, post-COVID exposure. It says that all learning users and carers can utilise the service. Do you want that extended to include and potential service users and
just think future.
Well, I'm happy with whatever Kate thinks. What you said.
We need to look at it and model what we need in the future, and not just based on decisions on today, but what we need in the future.
Yeah. And
So just
that,
expand to.
yeah, super. But in fact, future use is not just of LN, but of respite, as they both said. Great, thank you.
Right, so we have the recommendation as it stands, yes. Are we content?
Reasonably content. Right.
Item 11 has been taken off the agenda.
That was just an excitement.
I was unhappy with that. So, item 12 is IJB Directions Annual Report. Vicky.
Chair, the purpose of this report is to present to the IJB for noting the third annual report of the summary of the use of directions by the IJB. As detailed in the report, the IJB approved a revised directions policy and procedure in September 2020. The IJB Audit Committee, as part of its terms of reference, has a remit to maintain an overview of progress with the implementation of directives and to escalate any delivery issues to the IJB. IJB Audit has so far been presented with 6 update reports. These are presented to the IJB Audit Committee every 6 months. The latest one being at the IJB Audit Committee earlier this afternoon. Paragraph 5 sets out the summary detail of the directions issued over the year, and the copy of the directions log is attached to Appendix 1. As agreed at the previous IJB Audit Committee at which directions were discussed, completed and superseded directions from previous financial years have been removed from the log. As stated at paragraph 4, this report only provides a summary of the directions issued rather than providing comment on their content, etc. This report is for noting by the IJB, however, I am happy to take any questions.
Al? No?
Christina?
Oh, Christina?
No.
You like
No, I don't see anybody in the chat, so
I'm asking many times.
we have to note this report. Okay. 13 is Inverclyde HSP Strategic Plan Update, and again, Chief Officer.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So the report is the refreshed strategic plan update for the first quarter of 23-24, which looks at the performance outcomes and our engagement and consultation plans for a 5-year strategic plan from 2024, which is really quite important because it provides a timeline about how we're going to do that in terms of the granular detail. I think it was agreed that, first of all, I want to note that whilst the strategic plan commenced in 2019, at our previous IGB, we acknowledged that the progress was seriously impacted by the pandemic, and that in many respects it was back to the future conversations about where we thought we wanted to be, and maybe we had to go and review where we actually thought we had. It's a bit like the Hill End discussion that we had earlier on. We take a position at one point in time, but we have to reflect that we're dealing with a different set of circumstances moving forward. So that report was agreed by the IGB on March 2023. It was agreed that the updates or the next steps would be reported to the IGB, and we're taking it here today. I suppose one of the things that we kind of came to the report outlines is that, first of all, our strategic plan engagement and consultation about how we take that forward, and the strategic planning groups recognising that they are there now, thankfully. We have a strategic planning group, and our locality planning groups are there, so they should help to feed into the strategic planning groups, but they are still very much in their development and resilience, but we hope to use some of the expertise within the locality planning groups to feed into the strategic planning groups. We're very clear that because it was a 5-year plan and it was a very ambitious plan with lots of actions, that we're not starting from a blank bit of paper. So part of our strategic plan will be to refresh our strategic plan big actions. Now, we might want to discuss whether we want to continue to call them big actions, and hopefully that will be part of the consultation process. But the most important thing was the outcome framework, because you can appreciate the outcome framework only with something that's put in laterally, really in the last 9 months. And we want to enhance that and make it much more outcome focused. So we have an outcome framework, still need to do a bit of work to ensure that we're truly outcome focused in what we're measuring. The other thing is that Inverclyde Council and the HSEP will utilise Quintana, and this is the first time that the council have only started to use that as a performance framework. It's a system that's used across Scotland, and that will provide us with a level of reports about where we are. And for some of our elected members, they will be much more briefed on what the Quintana system will provide for us in terms of the improvement actions. And obviously the governance and the monitoring will continue through the IGB, but with the strategic plan being the mechanism or the strategic planning group being the mechanism for delivery, and the 6 monthly reports submitted to the IGB, and the IGB will receive a formal annual performance report, which we've kind of seen, which will include the progress of the strategic planning actions. So we're trying to bring everything as much together so that we're not having a whole load of reports that are basically standalone that we require, that ensure that we've got a golden thread running through that. So that's really where we are today with the strategic plan. We can see that, and apologies, so you can see that we're actively looking at the strategic plan, because some of the ambers say green. So we've changed they've changed it from green to amber, but we haven't changed the colour. So you can see that we had a green action and we've had to move it to amber because we haven't had the staffing in place, so there's been changed in staffing.
You've got black eye on. Yeah, you're just showing off.
I love it. I've been caught out for this before. I've confessed to something you probably didn't know. I've been caught out with this before, of having actions that are in black and white that actually need colour. So can I just say to you, you have to get that some of the actions are saying green, but they're actually amber. Okay, And that, so we'll make sure that we get a colour copy out to the IGP for this document. But it is, I did say to it, I was watching, I said, well, how do I know what's green and what's American? Various different shades of black. So it can actually show you about where we are and where the amber actions are. It gives you an outline of the number of ambers that we have, and there has been a shift in the ambers because obviously we're sitting with a vacancy for a strategic planning manager. Obviously we've got no reds, we've got 13 ambers, and some areas about process and people that we're missing that we hope to get over the line, and we've got 27 green and we've got 1 blue, which is complete. Okay, so I'm quite happy if anyone wants to take answer any questions.
Christina.
No, I would just like to say there's a part where you're talking in there about young carers, and the Carer Centre now have another additional worker for young carers, and we're looking at a secondment of one of the HSCP workers for at least a couple of days a week. So we will then have basically 2.5 people working on young carers in the centre, whereas previously we only had 1, so we think that's a big step forward.
Al?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. I mean, I've got 2 things very quickly. So the first thing is I would encourage you, you've talked to me about decluttering the language, and I'd encourage you to not lose sight of that. I think that's a really big ambition, trying to make it readable. You talk about less is more. I think that's part of that ambition. So don't lose sight of that. I think that's really helpful. And the only other thing I would say is we're the only HSCP that has a 5-year plan. The others all have 3-year plans, as do health boards and most other organisations. I say that because plan needs to be resourced, and it's very difficult to look out to years 3, 4 and 5 when we're doing annuality of finance and be really ambitious or really confident that we're going to have the loot to do this. So just a lodge of thought, you might decide 5 years is what you want, but we're out of step with the rest, and there's a reason that the rest are doing 3 years, I suspect. So just maybe resolve that in your mind. I can be persuaded, but just think about why we're doing 5 years and what the risk to that is, as well as any benefit.
I think, yeah, I completely agree with you. I've never ever actually had to manage a 5-year plan, and so it is something that I've inherited. I think that some of the because it's been sitting with some of our financial 5-year plan, and we've tried to tie it into that. But considering that it's always finances that are requiring to take you over the line, I think we should have more of a discussion in the strategic planning group if it is more realistic to make it 3, because your financial estate, so to speak, even though that we have got a 5-year plan in place for the purposes of good governance, we won't necessarily always know what that looks like definitively. So I would take on board some of the comments.
Anyone else? Don't see anything in the chat. Okay, recommendations, notes of plan, reflection progress update, notes of timing and plan for 5-year strategic plan 2024, notes of communication and daily plan for 5-year strategic plan 2024, notes of proposal at section 4. Agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you. Item 14 is a public sector equality duty or compliance update, and again, it's the chief of.
Okay, so it was agreed at the previous IGB that we bring an update around their compliances around their equalities. And you can see that we've made significant progress in terms of the detail of it. I'm going to find it. Significant progress about how we're taking that forward. I suppose that we had a discussion at the audit committee around that and where that sits at the risk register. And I think we want to I just want to reflect that the amount of work that has been done around the Health and Social Care Partnership of making us compliant with something that we didn't know that we were compliant with in the first instance is incredible. So you can see that there's only one action that's outstanding, and that's in relation to our workforce survey, and that that we're almost compliant, and considering that we've done that within 6 months, I just would like to thank the officers involved and taking that forward, because it is a statutory duty and everyone did take it to heart at the time. And it's assured for the level of activity that has been put in place to ensure that we become compliant. So any questions? I'm quite happy to say.
Christina?
Yeah, I mean, I would just like to say well done for this, because we were so far behind, and we won't go over the whole detail of how we got so far behind. But in another life, in another organisation, I saw equality slip because of operational duties. And when you're faced with difficult decisions and things that you have to do on a day-to-day basis, which the IJB and HSCP are faced with constantly, you know, it can be something that slips off the agenda. And we just need reassurance that it's not going to slip off the agenda, and the person who is charged with the equalities work will not have so much other work put on them that this kind of thing slips down the agenda again, and that we actually keep it in focus. Because if it slipped down again, we just wouldn't be able to defend our position on it.
And it needs to be integrated, it needs to be a live document, and I mean, whilst the qualities for compliance is one thing, it needs to be part of within the values of the HSCP. So I would hate it even to be one person's job. I think it's all our jobs, and it's incumbent on the IGB to ensure and challenge officers if we don't feel, and particularly for an area like Inverclyde, if we don't feel that we're taking equalities issues seriously enough. When I was the chief officer in the year that I've been here, because I've been a year, I've seen that we will get that challenge, and I absolutely value that challenge for us as an organisation taking forward, because unless we address the qualities first within Inverclyde, we don't address anything. So I wouldn't want to just say it as one person. It is on our radar, and we certainly, considering the efforts that we've made, are not going to be part of it. It will be part of our strategic plan. We have more equalities in our strategic plan, and every paper that comes to here, I would hope that we would think through about equality issues, because that's the purpose of why we're here today, as far as I'm concerned, as the chief officer.
Thank you, Kate. Anyone else questions? Yep. There's nothing in the chat, just need to. Recommendations don't refer to spirit was the current plan set in one of which notes are for a full presented to the March 2024 meeting of Inverclyde Joint Board with an update on the progress and implement the plan along with the new equality outcomes for 2024-28 and the equality mainstream report 2022-2024. Thank you, Kate. Item 15 is the minute of the IJB Audit Committee on the 22nd of June. Okay, David.
What's this?
The audit committee.
Yeah, that would be David.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I was having connection issues there, Chair. Apologies. Yes, this was an accurate reflection of our discussion at that meeting. Unfortunately, I was unable to attend, but we looked through the minutes today at the audit committee and we're content that this was an accurate reflection on where we currently are at that time.
Thank you, David.
Thank you, Chair.
Elizabeth myself, sorry.
Sorry. David, could you give us an update on today's meeting?
Yes, certainly. So in terms of today, in terms of today's meeting, Chair, there were no major issues that came out of it. The substantive element of the work we discussed was in terms of the annual accounts, and in particular the discussions with the external auditors, KPMG. And as a result of that, we've obviously made the recommendation, and through yourself, Chair, through this meeting, we have approved those accounts. But in terms of other substantial business, I wouldn't say there's anything of particular note that needs to be drawn to your attention, other than the fact that there is in fact there's going to be a planned development day for the audit committee, reflecting the change in the makeup of the committee, and that's going to be taken forward between myself as chair and Andy Priestman. So that'll be looking at things like risk appetite and other elements of the role of the audit committee, just to bring everyone up to speed and be singing from the same hymn sheet. But other than that, Chair, I don't think there's any of particular note I would wish to draw to your attention.
Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, Chair.